later this month.
It would have been a private visit. It would never have got into the papers or onto the television. But she was just going to come and bring a friend who was interested in Lighthouse and sit and talk to some of our service users and staff. And that kind of personal interest is really irreplaceable.
But the relentless media glare, even in this area of her life, took its toll. And following her separation from Prince Charles, she announced she would be scaling down her charitable work.
Over the next few months, I will be seeking a more suitable way of combining a meaningful public role with, hopefully, a more private life.
But the woman who wanted to be known as the Queen of Hearts continued to devote herself to her favourite causes. She brought more than publicity. For someone who was naturally shy, she became adept at putting others at ease.
If you'd seen her walking into a room with a number of old people all around, and she would pick out probably the oldest person in the room, and probably in a way, to our eyes, to camera's eyes, almost the least attractive, and she would go there, the hand would be into that older hand, and she would form a link that no other person in my experience has been able to do.
And she continued to highlight the plight of those who would otherwise be forgotten. When she went to Angola, crusading for a ban on landmines, she courted political controversy and put herself at some risk. Campaigners who'd been trying for years to get something done found governments began to notice at last.
And it wasn't until the Princess became involved at the end of '96 and early '97 with the Angola trip and with a number of other things that suddenly everybody woke up to this problem. And millions of people around the world have now seen her talking about this issue.
As one charity leader put it today, Diana, Princess of Wales, made a genuine difference to people's lives, using her public position and the media to create hope out of despair, and leaving even the most distressed with a sense that someone cared. Neil Dixon, BBC News.
And reaction to the Princess of Wales' death from the Duchess of York, who said she had lost a sister after hearing about it. The Duchess is travelling back to England from Italy with her two daughters. In a statement, the Duchess said the Duchess has lost someone she has always considered a sister and a best friend. The Princess's death has touched millions of people throughout the world. One country where she'll be remembered with particular affection is India. She visited the subcontinent photographers. The Princess was taken after the crash to a Paris hospital with severe chest injuries. Surgeons there spent 2 hours trying to save her life. The French President Jacques Chirac will meet Prince Charles on his arrival in Paris, and a small ceremony will be held at the hospital where the Princess died.
The Princess's final journey began at the Ritz in Paris, where she'd been having dinner with Dodi, whose family owned the hotel. She was photographed getting into her Mercedes car, and the pursuit by paparazzi then got underway. It was an everyday experience for Diana, and it had become a torment to her. The obsessive press interest extended to anyone linked with her. Dodi was well aware how much scrutiny they were both under from the media. According to eyewitnesses at the scene, her car was going fast to escape the attentions of the photographers when it crashed. It apparently hit a pillar in a tunnel on one of the through roads running alongside the River Seine. The motorcycle-riding photographers stopped beside the wreckage, the tangled mass of metal, clear evidence of the speed of the impact.
We saw a large blue Mercedes, darker blue, and the airbag on the passenger side was deployed. And we saw a lot of liquid on the ground, and we didn't know who it was at the time. Somebody came running towards us, speaking French, shouting in French, and we thought for some reason it was going to blow up in the tunnel. We stood there, watched a little bit, and police came about 7 to 10 minutes later, ambulance about 15 minutes later.
Although Mr. Fayed and the driver were killed outright, the Princess and her bodyguard were taken to hospital, where surgeons fought in vain to save Diana's life. Doctors said she'd had massive chest injuries and suffered a heart attack. Our ambassador in Paris was the first to try to put into words the emotions of the British people.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy. The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends, and with the family and friends of the others who died in the accident.
7 photographers have been arrested by French police and are being questioned about what happened. Their motorcycles are also being examined by the police, who will want to know exactly how the princess's car crashed and what speeds were being driven. The French authorities have confirmed that this is a criminal investigation and evidence is being gathered from the scene with a view to possible prosecution. The response from ordinary French men and women, meanwhile, has been heartfelt. Flowers have been put at the roadside where, for many people in many countries, one of the brightest lights in the world was extinguished early this morning. Neil Bennett, BBC News.
The Russian President Boris Yeltsin has added his voice to the tributes being made from around the world. He praised the late princess for her humanitarianism in a statement mourning her death. Princess Diana, the statement says, was well known and loved by the Russians. Everyone knew about her major contribution to charitable actions in and beyond Britain. Many exclusively humanitarian projects close to ordinary people were carried out in Russia with her direct involvement. The princess's brother, Earl Spencer, said he was profoundly shocked at the news of his sister's death, but he also attacked what he called the intrusive and exploitative media that had pursued Diana, saying he always believed they would kill the princess.
All those who've come into contact with Diana, particularly over the past 17 years, will share my family's grief. She was unique. She understood the most precious needs of human beings, particularly those that suffered. And her vibrancy and sparkle, combined with a very real sense of duty, are now gone forever. It is heartbreaking to lose such a human being, especially when she was only 36. This is not a time for recriminations, but for sadness. However, I would say that I always believed the press would kill her in the end. But not even I could imagine that they would take such a direct hand in her death, as seems to be the case. It would appear that every proprietor and editor of every publication that has paid for intrusive and exploitative photographs of her, encouraging greedy and ruthless individuals to risk everything in pursuit of Diana's image, has blood on his hands today. My heart goes out to the families of the others killed in this incident. Above all, my thoughts are with William and Harry, and with my mother and 2 sisters, who are showing tremendous bravery in the face of senseless tragedy. I would ask you please, at this time, to respect the fact that Diana was part of a family, and amongst the general mourning at her death, realise that we too need space to pay our final respects to our own flesh and blood. For that, we will need privacy. Finally, the one consolation is that Diana is now in a place where no human being can ever touch her again. I pray that she rests in peace.
The Princess of Wales's brother. Well, as the Russian statement from President Yeltsin illustrates, there's been a huge international outpouring of grief at Diana's death. The Prime Minister, Tony Blair, said she would be remembered with the deepest affection and love, and tributes have been flooding in throughout the morning from all over the world. David Loyne reports.
The royal family, led by the Queen, went to church as usual near Balmoral. A small crowd gathered to pay their respects. The Prince of Wales broke the news to his 2 sons, Princes William and Harry, early this morning. Tonight he'll bring back the body of his former wife from Paris. The man who married them 16 years ago and baptised the 2 princes is the now retired Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Robert Runcie.
My memories are all happy, and so far as Diana is concerned, a great sense of her eagerness to be up to it, and having to assure her that she was up to it, and a real tender desire to be what everybody expected of her.
On his way to church with his family in his Sedgefield constituency, the Prime Minister led political reactions to the death.
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated. Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her 2 sons, the 2 boys. Our hearts go out to them. We are today a nation in Britain in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us. She was a wonderful and a warm human being. Though her own life was often sadly touched by tragedy, she touched the lives of so many others in Britain, throughout the world, with joy and with comfort. How many times shall we remember her, in how many different ways? With the sick, the dying, with children, with the needy. When with just a look or a gesture that spoke so much more than words, she would reveal to all of us the depth of her compassion and her humanity.
Well, I want to express on behalf of my party and on behalf of my constituents here in Yorkshire our sadness and terrible shock in the news overnight. It has come as a great shock to everybody waking up this morning, and a great sadness to all of us, and of course we're all thinking about Prince William and Prince Harry and the other members of the family of the Princess. She was a unique and very lively and attractive individual, and so people will feel a personal sense of loss. But of course we should also pay tribute today to the tremendous work that she did for people involved with drugs, people with AIDS and other diseases, for homeless people, for young people in general, for causes such as the arts. She did a great deal of charitable and humanitarian work.
It's one of shock and horror. Our thoughts and our prayers and our first considerations must be for her family, the Prince of Wales, her wider family. Beyond that, she brought light and compassion to our life and much else as well, and that light has now gone out.
Outside Buckingham Palace, where Diana knew she would never live as Queen, there was real emotion, fulfilling perhaps her hope that she was Queen in people's hearts.
Shock. Against the reaction of the passengers this morning.
I think the world has lost a very beautiful, witty, clever and charming young lady, and I'm devastated. I'm a great royalist. It's just too terrible.
Seems such a sad waste and such a troubled life, and just all gone.
Religious leaders are still trying to make sense of a life cut short in such a dramatic way.
Perhaps it will help us all to focus on the really important things of life, of human love and relationships and a faith in God. And she had a faith in God, although she wasn't the kind of person who wore religion on her sleeves. There was a deep faith there going on. And her relationship with Mother Teresa, for example, was one of the she spoke to me about. So we cope, I think, by holding on to the things that she believed in.
All my sympathy goes clearly to the royal family, and especially her two sons, to whom she was very devoted. I think in many ways she had quite a lot of sadness in her life, but she will be remembered by the very considerable amount of good which she did. And I'm thinking not only recently on the question of landmines, but on the question also of the homeless, especially the young homeless, and really her compassion for people with AIDS. That's how she'll be remembered. And she was very popular in the nation. So this is a very sad moment for all of us.
President Mandela spoke for many world leaders, saying Diana was the best ambassador Britain had.
She also has been a critical figure in sensitizing the public about the danger of landmines, especially in our region here. And the fact that countries like South Africa, like Mozambique, as well as Angola, have decided to abolish landmines is due to a very large extent to her intervention.
Whatever the form national mourning now takes, thousands of people are already remembering the Princess of Wales in their own way. David Loyne, BBC News.
There's been much comment today about reaction to the remarks by the Princess of Wales' brother, Earl Spencer, in which he blames the press for playing a role in the death of the princess. He said at one stage that they had blood on their hands. Well, the editor of a major United States tabloid is reported from Washington as saying that pictures of the car crash that killed Princess Diana are being offered around the world for about $1 million. The editor, Steve Coz, editor of the National Enquirer, said in an interview that he urged the world press to join his newspaper in its stated decision to boycott publication of the death scene pictures. For 12 years, Diana, Princess of Wales, was a patron of Barnardo's, the children's charity. We're joined now from Westminster by its Senior Director, Roger Singleton. Mr. Singleton, what's the loss to Barnardo's?
Well, I think the principal loss is the happiness and the joy that the Princess of Wales brought to the people whom we work with and whom she visited week by week over the 12 years that she was our president. People who, in the main, have a pretty uphill struggle. They may have children with severe disabilities, major disadvantages, young women may have been abused as youngsters themselves, struggling to bring up 2 or 3 children on their own. These were the people whom the princess visited. They listened to her. They knew really, in essence, that she listened to them, and they went away feeling 10 feet tall as a result of that brief but very rich experience.
She could publicise and she could cheer people up, but could she get things done?
I think that was something that was really developing in the princess's public life. In the early years, she was more limited to seeing and meeting people individually or in small groups. But as she began to, I suppose, acquire more self-confidence, as she began to learn more about the real issues that confronted people in need today, then she became willing to speak out and become much bolder publicly on these issues. And there was just something rare about that unique chemistry of her personality, her standing on the international stage, her membership of the royal family, and her human concern and compassion. Bring it all together, and that really proved to be a very potent influence and force for good.
Because of her closeness to the royal family, did she have to hold back on her personal views, which may have verged on the political?
I think she was conscious of the fact that she had to be careful. From a few conversations I've had with her over the years, I think there were times when there were things that she wanted to say but realised that it would be inappropriate to say. But as with her well-known television Panorama interview, she didn't primarily see herself as a political animal. She was responding, I feel, to the hurt and to the pain which people had exposed to her that she was in touch with. And she wanted really society in general to be aware of those problems and hopefully to address them.
Across the range of her charitable
life of Princess Diana and the others who were with her, we liked her very much. We admired her work for children, for people with AIDS, for the cause of ending the scourge of landmines in the world, and for her love for her children, William and Harry. And I know that this is a very difficult time for millions of people in the United Kingdom who are deeply shocked and grieving. The American people send their condolences to all of them, and we value their friendship, and we understand this great and painful experience. For myself, I will always be glad that I knew the princess, and always think of her in very strong and positive terms, as will Hillary. And we can only hope that her work will go forward and that everyone who can will support her 2 fine sons and help them to have the life and the future that she would want. Thank you.
You yourself on this vacation have been subject to intrusive photographers. Is there a lesson in this tragedy for the press? Should we back off?
I think it is better right now if we let a little time pass and let this event and the people involved be honored and grieved, and then we'll have time to think about that and maybe make a better judgment. I think it's better for me not to say anything until this moment has received its due respect. Thank you.
And there was a new Countess Spencer, daughter of the romantic novelist Barbara Cartland. But soon it was Diana who was to become the celebrated member of the family. Rumours spread that her friendship with the Prince of Wales was blossoming into something more serious. Press and television besieged her at every turn. The palace tried in vain to play down speculation. And on the 24th of February 1981, the engagement became official. The wedding took place at St. Paul's on a perfect July day. Millions of television viewers around the world were dazzled by the event. Diana was just 20. And so the royal family welcomed a newcomer to its midst. It was the love story that brought crowds onto the streets again. They came to see the Queen, of course, and the Prince, but most of all, they came to see her. But the seemingly perfect fairy tale was destined not to have a storybook ending. From the moment their relationship had begun, doubts had been expressed over the long-term prospects of a marriage between two people who appeared to have little in common and whose age gap was nearly 13 years. Even by the end of their honeymoon, Diana had developed the eating disorder bulimia and was feeling confused and neglected by Charles. Within a year of her marriage, she gave birth to a son, William. William became the first male heir to go to kindergarten. From the time of her dazzling appearance on her first public engagement with her then husband-to-be, Diana's wardrobe became a continual focus of attention. The publication of the book Diana, Her True Story by Andrew Morton blew the lid off the whole story. The book, based on interviews with some of the princess's closest friends and written with the tacit approval of the princess herself, confirmed that her relationship with the Prince of Wales was cold and distant. It told of half-hearted suicide attempts by the princess during the early years of the marriage, and of her obsession with the belief that Charles continued to love a woman he'd fallen for years before, Camilla Parker Bowles. The prince later confirmed that he and Camilla had had an extramarital affair. Charles and Diana officially separated in December that year.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce, and their constitutional positions are unaffected.
Despite the ensuing furore, public affection for the Princess of Wales remained strong. She had chosen to accept a public role at the hard end of charity work. She was troubled by the problems faced by young people. Here she set the royal seal of approval on a television campaign designed to beat the drugs menace. She urged employers, on behalf of the charity Turning Point, to accept a moral responsibility for their workforce in helping them combat the cause and effects of drug and alcohol addiction.
We must remember, then, that the majority of Turning Point's clients come from ordinary communities. Very few of them resemble a stereotype junkie or drunk.
The plight of suffering children was a cause close to her heart. She was a regular welcome visitor to the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Sick Children in London and was patron of several children's charities. While her husband concentrated on the philosophy and practices of the modern world, Diana homed in on the individual. Abroad, too, Diana was proud to publicise the plight of the unfortunate and the rejected. On a visit to Indonesia in 1989, she was praised for publicly shaking hands with lepers, dispelling widely held myths about the disease. Her contributions, as in a revealing speech about those with eating disorders, were often informed by her own experiences.
From early childhood, many had felt they were expected to be perfect, but didn't feel they had the right to express their true feelings to those around them. Feelings of guilt, of self-revulsion, and low personal esteem, creating in them a compulsion to dissolve like a disprin and disappear.
The Princess of Wales began by bringing a breath of fresh air and a measure of glamour into the House of Windsor. But she became a sad figure to many as the story of her failed marriage unravelled. Her critics blamed her for helping to strip the monarchy of some of the mystique so important for its survival. But the Princess of Wales' unflagging support for the sick and disadvantaged earned her continued respect. And to the end, she remained a figure of public fascination.
Princess of Wales' body arrived at the airport's VIP area. On board were the princess's two sisters, Lady Jane Fellows and Lady Sarah McCorquodale. Then, at around 2:15, the Prince of Wales himself arrived at the wheel of a black estate car with another vehicle following. He appeared deep in gloom but composed. Even on a tragic day like this, there was still a receiving line to be greeted before the prince could board the plane, where he was reunited in grief with the princess's sisters, both old family friends, and Lady Jane, the wife of the Queen's private secretary. For Prince Charles, today must be bringing terrible memories of that other August day in 1979, when he and Prince Philip received the coffin of his great-uncle Earl Mountbatten of Burma after Irish Republican terrorists had killed him in 1979. Minutes after the prince's arrival, the plane was taxiing to the runway for takeoff.
And he'll shortly be inside the hospital grounds. There he is, arriving, we think, in front of the honour guard provided by President Jacques Chirac, the Garde Républicaine.
James, let's just stay with you for a moment. Do you detect any sense of remorse among the French that it happened in Paris?
A sense of deep shock, certainly. I hope you're able to see now the President greeting the Prince on the steps of the hospital, followed by Sir Michael Jay, Britain's ambassador, a very simple, informal greeting. And now the Prince is going into the hospital, I think, to speak to some of the medical staff and to some of the doctors who struggled for several hours here to try to save the Princess of Wales' life before they finally conceded some 12 and a half hours ago that they could do nothing to save her life. The Prince is just going inside the hospital building now. The Garde Républicaine will stay here at attention throughout the next hour or so. First, the Prince and the President will have a private conversation, and then we understand the Prince and members of Diana's family will obviously go to see the body of the Princess of Wales.
Sombre scenes indeed, James. And how would you describe the atmosphere at the hospital? Have you met any of the staff? Do you get
we
any
haven't
feeling
been able Diana, that they knew the Princess and felt her almost as a friend. And I've spoken to people much older, one remarkable woman who said that she felt the Princess had had a life full of sorrow, but she'd nevertheless given so much joy to others, in Africa, she said, in Bosnia, here in France, in Britain and around the world. So very heartfelt emotions here as people have come to lay their floral tributes in front of the hospital, tinged, I must say, with deep anger, which I suspect may develop over the coming days as questions are asked about the controversial role of the photographers, the paparazzi, whether they in fact forced this car into this tragic accident.
But James, when the French have what are considered to be pretty draconian privacy laws, how can this happen? How can the police tolerate the activities? We've heard other prominent people talk about being buzzed by these bikers in the same way. How can the French allow it to happen when they're supposed to take a stern line on intrusion into private lives?
There does appear to be a contradiction, I accept, but the French would say that all they can really do is to aim to ensure the privacy of the individual by prosecuting or otherwise disciplining those who publish material which has clearly been obtained by gross intrusion into someone's privacy. So they would argue, the French authorities certainly have argued, that it's impossible for them to police the streets of the country to prevent freelance photographers, for that's what we believe they were, from stalking her, from tracing her movements. There is no law in France which physically prevents them from doing that. The French are obviously investigating charges that could be pressed against the photographers, possibly action that was liable to cause or did contribute materially to the accident, and that could be a very serious charge if it was sustained, equivalent perhaps to a manslaughter charge in a British court. But the French are at pains to point out that it's their culture that's different from ours, they feel. The fact that they have the laws is an expression of what people here expect. They expect far less intrusion into the private lives of their public figures. And I think we've seen that from the history of both the present President of France and his predecessor, François Mitterrand, when stories have emerged of adulterous relationships, of love children at the highest level in politics. It has not caused the sort of consternation and, frankly, the sort of exploitation by sections of the press within France, which one would be bound to expect in Britain. So I think it's a cultural as well as a legal distinction.
What are the legal processes now that we're likely to be involved in? Do the French have an equivalent of an inquest, a coroner?
There will have to be certainly some form of legal process, particularly as criminal investigations are underway. One of the grim tasks, of course, that faces Diana's two surviving sisters and the Prince of Wales is that they must make formal identification of the body. It is purely a formality that it must be gone through. And of course, the judicial authorities and the judge, the investigating magistrates, examining the whole case, both the causes of the accident and any case that might be brought against the photographers, they will want to see the complete post-mortem accounts from the hospital of the injuries sustained by the princess, by Dodi Al-Fayed, and by the driver. There's terrible injuries which killed all three of them, but which Diana struggled against for some hours after the accident.
Would you expect there to be a public mood for people to be brought to account if they can be shown to be culpable?
Oh, I think from people I've met here today outside the hospital and more widely in France, I think it's very clear that there will be a strong public demand for action by the judicial authorities if any case can be brought against the photographers who were taken into custody at the scene. There was real revulsion, particularly at reports that photographers then got close-up shots of the wreckage of the car, of the bodies inside, before they were hustled away by police. You may have heard a report that one of them may have been set upon by members of the public and in fact beaten up at the scene. So strong was the feeling against them. I think you can sense that here among the crowd at the hospital and more widely across France. There will be a demand for stern action, and that there is a belief in France that if a case can't be sustained in this incident, in this appalling, tragic episode, then it's hard for the French to maintain that they really do have strong laws in these cases.
James Robbins, for the moment, thank you. We'll be back when the Prince of Wales leaves, of course. Well, I'm joined now in the studio again by our court correspondent, Jenny Bond. First of all, Jenny, do you have any further information?
No, that's the latest. Wires are saying, of course, that this is the saddest day and the saddest mission of Prince Charles's life, and I'm sure, as James has said, that's entirely true.
It is astonishing to realise that she was pronounced dead less than 12 hours ago.
Yes, events have moved on very fast from there. I think there will still be a tremendous shock, really, for the rest of this week around the world and around the country. It was so unexpected. People might have thought many things would happen to the Princess of Wales, but not this.
And the royal family have a reputation for, I think, as Michael Delanoy mentioned, for being not very good at showing their feelings.
Indeed.
If you could speculate about their feelings, what are you going to tell us?
Now, I think they will be acting as any other family. They do have emotions, of course they do. They're not accustomed to showing them in public, but I'm told that in private they are very affectionate and very caring one to the other. It's something to do with a stiff upper lip, if you like, or appearance, that they don't show outward concern for one another. But in private, they do care, and I'm sure they will be sitting at Balmoral deeply shocked. The grandparents now have a very great task on their hands. Prince Charles is in Paris. They have these two bereaved and shocked young men to care for. And as I say, I think they're going to stay there for the night, and then they will presumably be in charge of shepherding them down, bringing them to London, trying to help them rebuild their lives.
And I don't know if you had the chance recently to speak to Buckingham Palace, but presumably we're promised still an announcement about the arrangements when?
Possibly this evening, as I say, they were hoping to do so once the coffin is brought back sometime after 7 o'clock. It may drift on, there may be some ends to tie up, and so it may be tomorrow before we get the full details, but I think it will be certainly within the next 24 hours.
Jenny Bond for the moment, thank you. But when the accident happened, Diana, Princess of Wales, was travelling with a bodyguard that had been provided by the Ritz Hotel in Paris. For years, senior officers from the Royalty and Diplomatic Protection Squad had voiced serious concerns about Diana's private trips, when she would often insist on no protection. Our Home Affairs correspondent John Silverman reports.
The Princess's determination to lead as normal a life as possible posed significant security problems. On her regular visits to her gym in West London, Diana insisted on travelling unaccompanied, despite police concern. This routine changed for a time after the discovery of an IRA hideout in South London in 1996, when it became clear that members of the royal family were high on a list of potential targets. Armed police protection was always provided when she was with her two sons, William and Harry, because of their position in relation to the throne. But on holidays, such as her trip to the south of France with Dodi Al-Fayed, Diana wanted to keep her movement secret, and if there was any security, it would have been organised privately, probably by Mr. Al-Fayed. The value of close protection was underlined in 1994 during a visit to Australia by Prince Charles. When a man armed with a starting pistol rushed the podium, his protection officer took charge immediately. Diana's insistence on moving around as a free agent was the despair of Scotland Yard, but no one can know whether the presence of a royal protection officer in Paris might have prevented her tragic death. John Silverman, BBC News.
I'm joined now from Downing Street by our chief political correspondent, John Sargent. John, what new can you tell us from there?
Well, the Prime Minister is due to fly from Teesside to RAF Northolt, where he'll be meeting Prince Charles when he arrives back with the body of the Princess and with her two sisters. That is due to take place at 7 o'clock, that meeting, but already the official car has gone from here in Downing Street, and the Prime Minister's Press Secretary, Alistair Campbell, left a short time ago to be with the Prime Minister at Northolt.
Now, of course, the House of Commons is deep in the middle of its summer recess, and I should imagine there are very few members of Parliament around. But do you get any reaction from those that you have been able to talk to?
Well, I think obviously there's this question of privacy is bound to come up. But I have to say that the view of the Prime Minister, which he's expressed before, is that he's against any new privacy law. So I think although people will obviously be extremely annoyed about the allegations about the press and what happened in Paris with the photographers, I get the impression that officially it's unlikely to lead to action. And of course, at the moment, people are not discussing it in those terms.
Why then did Robin Cook raise precisely that issue in his first reaction? He was practically the first cabinet minister off the mark earlier today.
I think because they realised immediately that this would be a focus of attention. I think they're quite prepared for people to be extremely annoyed about this and for people to draw conclusions about the long-term invasion of privacy of the royal family and particularly the princess. But the problems of framing a law which would stop celebrities being chased by photographers is, of course, immense. It's a ground that's been covered many times in the past, and politicians are wary about rushing into judgment on this issue because they know how difficult it's been in the past.
Can we take it that Labour's commitment to freedom of information and freedom of expression will almost certainly override any pressures for there to be restrictions of those kinds?
Well, I think the point to bear in mind is that although, as I've said, the Prime Minister's view is that he is in favour of regulation by the industry, self-regulation. He's also been very concerned in the past about the general attitudes of the press. So one's got to separate these 2 points up: future legislation, but also what should the industry do about these excesses. And that does involve the activities of paparazzi. It does involve obvious invasions of privacy, of which there's been a great deal in recent years.
John Sargent in Downing Street, thank you very much. Hundreds of flowers and tributes to Diana, Princess of Wales, and Dodi Al Fayed have been laid outside Harrods store in London, which is owned by Dodi's father, Mohammed Al Fayed. The relationship between Diana and Dodi became public less than a month ago, but had been described by those close to the princess as her first serious romance since her divorce from Prince Charles.
These were among the last pictures of Diana, Princess of Wales, taken yesterday as she boarded a private plane in Sardinia. She was flying to France at the end of a holiday with Dodi Al Fayed, with whom she was having what many commentators said was a loving relationship. Photographs showed Diana looking relaxed as the two enjoyed time together in the Mediterranean, where earlier they'd taken a cruise. It appeared that there was no attempt to hide the relationship, which was described as Diana's first serious romance since the divorce. Dodi Al Fayed, who was 41, enjoyed all the trappings of wealth as the jet-setting son of the Egyptian owner of Harrods. Outside London's most famous store today, the Union flag was at half-mast as a mark of respect.
He was a very kind, very gentle, very courteous person, and he had a great respect and regard for her. He valued her friendship, as did the whole of the family.
Dodi Al Fayed's image as an international playboy proved irresistible to the media and was compounded by news that a former girlfriend, the Californian model Kelly Fisher, was suing him. She claimed he jilted her after a promise of marriage. When in recent weeks it started to emerge that his friendship with Diana of 10 years standing had developed into a love affair, newspapers invested fortunes competing for the most revealing images of the couple. It was publicity which almost threatened to overshadow Diana's visit to Bosnia, where she was campaigning against landmines despite accusations that she was involving herself in politics.
People used to charge her with involving herself in politics. She used to say, I'm a humanitarian, I always have been and I always will be. And that was absolutely true.
For all the controversy surrounding Harrods and its owner, today the store was closed as simple tributes, including one in Arabic, were left to his son Dodi, who was a film producer, and Diana. A spokesman said the last week had been one of the happiest of their lives. They would be terribly missed. John McIntyre, BBC News.
And Jenny Bond joins us again. Jenny, what about Dodi Al Fayed? Was he the love of her life?
I think it was too early to tell that, Peter, but certainly it was the first real romance she'd had since the breakup of her marriage, since her divorce. It was almost a year to her divorce when she started seeing him. It's a year and 3 days since her divorce that she died. It was a short romance, but a very powerful one. People who knew her said that she was enormously happy and relaxed within that relationship. She felt that that family, the whole family, asked nothing of her at all. And they gave her a great deal, not only materially, far more than she'd ever experienced before, really, this jet-set life, but emotionally they didn't lean on her in any way at all. And she was very happy with them and had one of the happiest holidays with her boys, that first holiday in Saint-Tropez with Mr. Fayed and Dodi, that she'd ever had, she said.
Now, the Duchess of York has put out a statement. At one stage, they were regarded by the media, certainly, as the sort of terrible twins who were, some people took the view that between them they were not doing the best they could for the royal family. The Duchess of York is saying she's lost someone she always considered a sister and a best friend. There are no words strong enough to describe the pain in her heart. Was that reciprocated by Diana? Were they close again?
It was for a very long time reciprocated. When I spoke to her last,